Hello, welcome to Chili Grits Podcast. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Reverend Manikka Bowman.
And I'm Dr. Aisha Francis.
And this is our very first episode of Chili Grits Podcast. And we're elated because Chili Grits Podcast for us, it's really about where Southern sayings lead to the foundation of success. And we both moved here from the South and know a little bit about how Southern sayings shaped our lives and how it has influenced us.
So moving to the hub and trying to keep that bit of our Southern selves alive, it's one of the things that has kept our friendship together. And so we thought we'd share a bit of that with you.
So Aisha, how did we meet? Let's tell the people how it happened.
Yes, well, we met through friends.
We did.
We met through a mutual friend, Simone Monique Barnes.
Shout out to Simone.
Hey, Simone. Who had like a brunch. I think she had a brunch.
It was Mardi Gras.
Yes, it
for
was
her birthday. Yes.
So, Simone is a mistress of ceremony and celebration, and has a February birthday, and has quite the fun way of really celebrating that. So we were both invited to a brunch that she held at her house, and one of the centerpieces of that brunch was cheese grits.
It was cheese grits. It absolutely was. Yes. Yeah. And then you got married how many days? A week later?
Actually, the month later. So our anniversary is March 28th, and that was in February. So yeah, a little bit later that spring.
Full disclosure, I'm still all in my feelings that I didn't get invited to the wedding, despite the fact we only met like a month beforehand. But I digress.
You know, we've made up for that.
Yes, we have. We've gotten past it.
Yes. So then after meeting then, and after kind of we got back from honeymooning and all that, I think we reached out and had like a couples meetup here in Cambridge.
We did.
On Reed Street.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. So that was in 2009.
Yeah, and we have gone through all of life's ups and downs and everything in between. Had babies at the same time, and our children are really close to each other. Absolutely. And it's just been a beautiful friendship along the way, and we've just grown and evolved with each other. So I'm really grateful for our friendship, and I'm grateful for us coming together to create Chili Grits Podcast.
Yes, which is something we've talked about and toyed with off and on in various forms. We've talked about maybe we should write a book, maybe it would be an article, and this just seems like something that we could dive in on. So we're going to see where this goes.
Yes, the book will come later.
Yes, but the point is, we're really excited about sharing a bit of ourselves and learning more about our own Southern experiences, which are very different, y'all. So let's kind of dive into that. So Manikka, where are you from?
I am from Lake Charles, Louisiana, on the bayou. Grew up there, and it really has shaped a lot of who I am. And for those people that's watching in Cambridge or know me from Cambridge, know that, the people in North Cambridge know that every time Mardi Gras season comes around, that Mardi Gras flag is out and it's flying the whole time.
You're known for that.
Yeah, so I bring that part of myself with me because I really believe Louisiana is a very special place. And, every place has issues, but it definitely shaped me and who I am. So, Aisha, what part of the South are you from?
I am from the Mid-South. I was born in Atlanta, and around age 7 moved to Nashville, which is where I was raised and where I lived until I moved to Boston in 2005. And so my Mid-South experience, like you, really is a core part of me. And I have this tea towel that says, I don't care where we are geographically. I mean, it says something much more succinct than that. But basically, I don't care where we are. It's the South in my house. And that's really how that's just the spirit that I try to bring with me in terms of hospitality, and always wanting to remember that warmth that I grew up with. So my family on my mom's side is from Nashville as far back as we can trace. And that just means so much to me in terms of knowing that rootedness. And I do feel a very real, tangible sense of ownership of what Middle Tennessee is today, and the Franklin area, Nashville, Madison, Hendersonville, those parts, Gallatin, those are where my people are from, and where they've been from. Is the farthest back that we can record is 1832, and Tennessee was established in 1799. So, I feel like I'm a Tennessean in my soul, and I'm a Bostonian by choice, but I'm definitely a Southerner by birth.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, Aisha has done a lot of work to trace her genealogy, which I think is really inspiring. And I can only go back maybe 3 generations. My husband, his family can track back really far. But between him and Aisha, it really has inspired me to, take some time to actually explore that part of myself. And, what's interesting for me, Aisha, is, we are here now. We made that choice, but we are a part of a long lineage and group of people over history when it comes to African Americans that moved from the South to the north for various reasons. And so it's going to be really nice as we talk about what are those Southern sayings, those pearls of wisdom that people from the South took with them and made and created a life for themselves here in the Northeast. So I feel like it's a privilege to be a part of that legacy and that history in a different way, in a 21st century way, that is.
Yes. So regionalisms are real, I think.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be fun exploring the extent to which we can claim some of these sayings as Southern sayings or not. And so that's a whole
both
different
are
thing.
true.
Both,
yes,
that's a whole different thing. So I claim anything I learned is Southern because I grew up in the South. And sometimes folks are like, wait, I'm from New York, and I say that too. So does that make it a Southern saying or not? I don't know. We're going to interrogate
it's
all
Southern
of that.
to us.
It's Southern to me and
yes.
my frame of mind. Remember what we said, wherever I am is the South. So,
Indeed.
So we're bringing that up today. So should we get into the saying for today?
Well, let's get into it. So, Aisha, what is the Southern saying that we are going to dive into today?
The Southern saying today is, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yes. Okay, so tell me more about this phrase and how it has influenced you, maybe a little bit of history, where it came from.
Okay, so, a month ago, if you asked me where it came from, I would say I got it from my mama, right? Who says this a lot. And it's just one of the things that I remember her sharing with me in terms of problem solving and how to win friends and influence people, right? That whole Dale Carnegie approach. And Dale Carnegie is someone who her father, my grandfather, actually admired. And I remember him having a copy of that book. And so I think it was just kind of part of the ethos of my family as I think back on it, that there's multiple ways to approach any kind of situation, but being nasty about it isn't usually going to get you as far. And so my mom would always say, you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar. Remember that in terms of how you treat people, how you approach challenges, how we treat each other in this household. It was like, you're not going to we shouldn't be treating people outside the house better than we treat ourselves.
That's true.
And just to always think about that sense of respecting each other. So when doing some research, a little bit of diving into the etymology of the phrase, I thought it was really interesting that one of the earliest recorded uses of the phrase has nothing to do with the South at all, but is actually in Poor Richard's Almanac, which everybody will know is put together by Benjamin Franklin. And it appeared there in 1744, and it was written, "Tart words make no friends. Spoonful of honey will catch more flies than gallon of vinegar." And it's just, I think, so fitting that when we were putting together the order of our sayings, this one was first, and then we did the etymology piece later, and to have this Benjamin Franklin connection, because I lead Benjamin Franklin Cummings Institute of Technology.
Indeed.
I just think, that kind of kismet and coming together is, at least in my Southern tradition, one of these things where like this was meant to happen.
Indeed,
we should.
indeed.
This is exactly, we're doing what we should be doing exactly when we should be doing it.
Are we the spirit is at work.
Exactly.
Yes,
Everything is
yes,
aligned.
yes.
Things are aligned.
That's the Reverend Bowman in me, right?
That's the Reverend Bowman in you. And so I think that the point is, and we can talk about politeness and these things, but the point is, in my house, being polite ruled the day. And this is just another way to say being rude about something isn't going to usually get you what you want. So you might as well think about a different way to approach it. So how did this saying come up in your upbringing, if at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. The saying was there, but the one time I really distinctively remember someone saying it to me was actually when I was in Atlanta in graduate school, and there was this situation, and I was upset. And I was like, I am going to tell this person.
You made a plan for telling them off.
Yes. And this person just like politely just touched me and said the same. And it made me pause. But that's the one time I distinctly remember internalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting for me. So Aisha, that I am a staunch womanist, feminist at heart. And, the beauty of, I love the South, and I actually love what the North has done for me as it relates to being able to lean into that part of who I am as a womanist and as a feminist that for whatever reasons, I didn't have the space to do so, or maybe I was so young, I didn't have the agency to do so when I did live in the South. But for me, that phrase in that moment helped me to just calm myself a bit before I went off. But then as I lived with it a little bit more, I started to realize that for me, everything is in context, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, that phrase, I believe, lives in context in the moment. And for myself, I give myself permission to use it as a tool when needed, because there are moments when sometimes the vinegar may be a bit more effective than the honey. And that's just real talk. And so really being able to have the ability to move back and forth, that is what I have given myself permission to do, particularly with that particular phrase. And it definitely sticks with me because I remember that moment when the gentleman just gently touched me and said the words, and it reoriented me with the situation.
Yeah. So, you're touching on something there, which is this expectation perhaps that we bring the kinder, gentler, softer self no matter what the circumstances.
Yeah.
And I do believe, to your point, there are moments when you need to bring out the sharp elbows. And that I think has been, because part of what we wanted to talk about too in this format is how have these sayings really animated our leadership journeys.
Yes.
And I do think that over time I have learned to be more direct. I think that leaning on you can catch more flies and with honey than you can with vinegar, for me, kind of turned into, in some ways, a type of indirect approach to conflict and confrontation that ultimately sometimes ends up making things that could be a short, direct conversation just take too long. Right?
And I can see that.
Still learn to say no with a smile.
Yeah.
And so that's been my shorthand for saying, look, I can still embody that ethos of respect and being polite, but there's this whole difference between, I think there's a trap sometimes around being polite and kind and
Absolutely.
nice that burdens women, and maybe it burdens Southerners in some ways that aren't productive when it comes to calling a spade a spade.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think being able to have nuance and recognize the difference, but still be able to value the pearl of wisdom, which it is a pearl of wisdom, I think has been really crucial and critical for me. And when I think about the honey, pulling in the flies. I think about that as a leader myself. It's really, for me, it's about honey is sweet, and it naturally brings people and insects and things to it, right? And people like sweetness. There's no way to get around that. America's waistlines tells that story, quite frankly. It's a struggle, right? And for me, what that represents is whatever environment that I'm in, no matter what the circumstance, no matter the individual or the dynamic in which we're working through, there's something sweet there, right? And as a leader, I believe it's my responsibility, even when it's tough, to be able to identify what is sweet in a moment. And for me, that's a skill set that you need to develop, because when you're in complex situations, it's very hard sometimes to find things that are sweet. And, Aisha, leading here in Cambridge during the absolute worst of COVID as an elected official, it was very difficult to find sweetness in a time that was just hard for all parties involved. But in order for myself in that context, as well as other leadership roles that I've been in, to really be able to connect with individuals just at a human level, is to find the things that make them great, that makes them shine, and what's sweet about them. And so that's how I tend to embody that phrase. So for me, that's not necessarily showing up and being quote unquote sweet all the time, but being able to recognize that in other people, I think creates an environment that then allow people to work together in a different way.
No, I love that. And listening to you talk, it reminded me of the fact that often in negotiations and contract negotiations, there is this phrase of a sweetener, that's something that makes the difficult part of the negotiation palatable to the other party. And the other concept or kind of ceremonial sweetness I was thinking of, you'll know this as a minister, but there's that ceremony. It's a way of doing a christening or blessing where you have the salt, the pepper, the vinegar, and the honey, the tastings that you give, because, the reality is that as sweet as we want to be, there's always some vinegar in life.
And sometimes that sweetness for one party is straight up vinegar for another. I know. And you just got to swallow it, right?
Yeah.
It's just
got to learn to coexist. But that being said, I love the saying. I definitely always reminds me of my mom, Judy Francis, who really, growing up, I feel like she said that to me, on a weekly or monthly basis, just as a way to think about, how to kind of move through life. So
yes. And so how, has there been a particular moment where, since you've been here in Boston, where that phrase just popped into your mind in a leadership moment, or helped you work through a leadership moment?
Yeah, it really does embody how I lead. I just I think very carefully about word choice. I'm an English literature major, and I think that words are something you cannot take back. And where I have evolved is less focused on the nice polite stuff, and more on almost the accuracy, the truth, right? So how do you get to the truth in a way that doesn't cut people down? And I think I am always trying to balance information that needs to be shared, messages that people, I think leadership, I read somewhere something like getting across messages that people don't want to hear and yet have to adjust to. And so in my experience, doing that in a way that is kind, doesn't mean you're always, sweet, sappy, saccharine, has gotten me further. And then on the flip side, you might have seen that T-shirt. There's a lot of statement T-shirts out, but one of them says, "I don't chase, I attract."
Okay. I like it.
And, honey does attract.
It does.
Honey
It
does attract.
It
and
does.
so I think there's something about that way of being not in a not in the couple sense, but just in the sense of life, and thinking about who do I want to surround myself with. Like, I don't, if you're sour on life, just in general, or sour on most situations, a glass half empty type of person, that's just not my vibe. And you could call it reality, or there's a whole strain of thought now about Afro-pessimism and all of these things. That's valid. I think that's a valid way of life, is a valid orientation. And, goodness knows there's enough evidence in the world for that to kind of be a reasonable way of thinking. That's not my cloak to put on. When I try to put that cloak on, it doesn't feel comfortable for me. And so I do think that, whether it's nature or nurture, because I was definitely nurtured to go in the the honey versus the vinegar kind of mindset or framing. It's just in me. It's ingrained. So it's there. But, I do say that to say that I think the flip side of that, or the downside, is if I do get to the point where I feel like I'm in a vinegar space, I'm thinking very, very deeply about who put me there and why. Yes. Because it's not often that I can't see my way through something from the perspective of the sweetness of life. And so, that's a red flag moment for me to say, whoa, what is this that I've stepped into? So it's almost like a litmus test, I think, in terms of, who I'm dealing with, the situations that I'm dealing with, partnerships that we're considering. And it's something that is more of a feeling or a way that I'm vetting experiences through. And so that's how it shows up in my daily work.
It's interesting, Aisha, for me, we have different leadership paths, right? And, working in the public sphere for a while, and I've worked on a lot of different campaigns. I've been all in the political world. That space, it's designed for conflict, right? And so the ability to find sweetness, even with the person that you're going against, you can't do that publicly. You can, but like the way in which these systems are set up, it's like you may be giving in to something, right? If you then decide to, publicly, that is, show sweetness or whatever that is to another individual. At least that is what politics has evolved into. Not something that I like per se, but that's the culture that I'm trying to articulate. So I think that is interesting to how do you then manifest this concept when, depending on the circumstance or the professional space that you're in, it lends to an environment that's counter to, using the honey to bring the flies in. I think you can still hold on to that person and who you are, but I think that there are certain situations where it may be complex. And I also think, particularly as people, we're of African American descent, but anyone that's a part of a underrepresented class or who has experienced struggle, being able to find honey when, oh my God, you get so much vinegar in life is it's hard, and it manifests in how you then interact with situations. So I think the saying and being passed down, maybe it was an aspiration,
Oh, interesting.
For us, because we've gotten so much vinegar in life, quite frankly, that learning how to live in a world where you can use the sweetness, which is, from my vantage point, is our God-given humanity, because everything that God made has beauty in it. And there's other stuff, but we're going to focus on the beauty right now.
Yes,
being able to hold on to that, I think is key.
I think I agree with you, and I believe that if I think about myself, you know, put myself in my mother's shoes around the time that she was using this phrase with me, right? Which would kind of be where I am in life now. You know, it was a single mom, you know, raising me with a lot of support from my maternal grandparents. And my mother worked in customer service. She was a adjuster and a manager at Allstate. I think a lot of that came from the customer service experience, which is, you know, here I am on the other side of a receiving end of a lot of vitriol all day long.
Yeah.
And the folks that, not that she didn't go the extra mile for all of her clients and customers, but the people who really got the extra mile were the people who were nice.
Yes,
and the people who were respectful.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, today, fast forward, the most recent context that I remember her bringing the phrase up again was in the context of a customer service exchange that she was having, where she was tempted to just, you know, let somebody have it. And she was telling herself, but you know what, Aisha, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, right?
Yep.
Like, yep. That's right. You know, so it's more of a way to check ourselves when we're feeling ourselves get to a tipping point or a boiling point. And I think, you know, at the kind of a micro level, it's an example of how this was really coming up in daily life.
Yeah. So when I hear grace, you know, it's a phrase that reminds us to give people grace. It's a phrase that allows us to recognize the humanity in other people and in ourselves.
Whether or not it's a vinegar situation or a honey situation.
Yeah. And as an adult, learning how to be able to manage vinegar or vinegar situations.
That's a growing edge for me.
That is, you know, that's, you know, sometimes you just got to like, just taste a little bit of honey to remind you.
Yes, that there's something on the other end.
There is something on the end. Well, I think this has been a great first episode of Chili Grits Podcast.
We did it.
One in the books, y'all.
Exactly.
Can I say y'all? Yes. All right. I'm saying y'all. I'm reclaiming y'all.
Yes.
Seriously, I let it go, you know.
I've been hearing it a lot more. You know why? Because one of the well, we can talk about this on another episode. I'm not going to give us into a divert into a whole different thing, but it's like gender neutral.
Oh,
and it's very inclusive, and it actually ends up on lists of ways to talk about groups of people in gender neutral ways. So you can say folks, you can say y'all.
I love it.
A lot more y'all I've been hearing these days from people who are not Southerners.
All right, well let's do it. All right, y'all.
All right.
Well, this has been wonderful, and we hope that you join us again for our next episode of Chili Grits Podcast.